Good evening. Thank you for being here. The good news is that our session is not going to be an hour, but an hour and a half. And the other good news is that you're going to like it. Now, I want this session to be very interactive. So can I ask straight up whether you can find a partner you can share with? Because I want there to be a sharing on 3 levels. We as panel members are going to share with you. You are going to share with each other. And you are going to share with the audience. So especially when you are not from Africa or from the sub-Saharan continent, can you please find a partner from Africa to sit next to and share with? Not a threesome, no, a partner. Yes, can you do that? Just stand up and find somebody you want to explore. Yes? Okay. I have to speak off the cuff because somebody took my notes away. You know, things happen, you have to roll with the punches. Our session will have 2 parts. In the first place, we have to address the Africa question because, you know, Africa has of course been a pretty colonized and abused continent. And so in order to kind of address the fear and anxiety around AI and ICT, we have to kind of raise the question, what is needed? What needs to be done for the AI and ICT revolution that is upon Africa not to result in another wave of exploitation and neocolonization? So it's a positive question. We are not going to commiserate about the past. We're going to ask the question, what can we do collectively, but especially individually, so that the present is not like the past? When we have addressed that question in the 3 waves, first the panel members speak, you respond to the panel members, then you share with each other. We will address the second question. How do I want to be human in a time of artificial intelligence and information communication technology? You see, there cannot be any experts on a question like this. You cannot give your ideas for your humanity away to any other human being, and less of all to a bot. So that is why I designed the session like this, so that you can become your own expert, even though you may not have given this a lot of thought and you may not have read all the news and the theories about it. Are there any questions so far about the structure of the session? You all have a partner you want to share with? Okay, then I will start by giving the word to the panel members. They will introduce themselves, and the first question they are going to answer is, what needs to be done, what is needed for the AI and ICT revolution that is about to engage Africa not to result in another layer and avalanche of neocolonization and exploitation? Thank you.
Well, provided the instrument works, and I trust it does. Thanks, Ineke, and let me thank the team for inviting me here. I used to be the Statistician-General of South Africa. I've occupied this position for 17 years, having worked in the organization for 34 years. So I'm not sure whether I can answer the question of colonialism. I'm a bean counter. And I did that for 34 years in the statistics office. Having retired, I suppose it behooves me to try and answer some of the questions that are relevant. Let me appreciate the fact that technology is the thing of the future and is not new. What is new around the current technology is speed, size, and its ubiquitous nature across regions. Ford automation was the advancement of technology. Nightingale in antibiotics was technology. Louis Pasteur and the treatment of smallpox was technology. Google, of course. And of course, we also know that Truman in the Hiroshima, Nagasaki was technology. So there can be bad and good ways in which you deploy technology. Now, the question of Africa and the trajectory of the 60 years. By the way, Korea wanted to be like Bombay in 1960. And in fact, it wanted to do like Lagos in 1960. Korea wanted, not Korea, but Singapore wanted to be like Lagos, Nigeria in 1960. And the question is, what has happened over those past years? Would Nigeria even dream to look like Singapore 60 years later? It's very difficult even to think about that dream. You see, in 1960, the first development decade was established by the UN, in particular focusing on the developing world, including Singapore, Africa, and so on. In 1970, that was the second decade. In 1980, it was the third decade of development. And of course, the IMF and the World Bank came with their structural adjustment programs that actually destroyed many developing countries. In that period of the 60s and 70s, Africa was known for coups and counter-coups. Nkrumah, Lumumba, we can mention them, all of them displaced with foreign influence. The former colonialists destabilized Africans in their fight for post-colonial era. 1990, well, when the development decade terminology seems to be too difficult to swallow, it mutated into MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, and in 2015, which is almost the fourth, it was not even mentioned, named as the fourth, or the development decade, and then it became the SDGs. I'm not sure why the terminology was changed, but I have suspicion that it was the inherent failures of these development decades achieving what they intended to achieve. So, in this period, what was the context of technology? In that period, I think post-World War, you found the Americanization, not only of Africa, but of the world, through advertising in order to deal with the overproduction problems of the US, to find markets, and to deal with the post-1945 baby boom, so that consumption led anything. And that's when we had the supply economies creating their own demands. Say's laws on supply creates its own demand. And we have been with that law ever since. So, what did that situation create? In a way, it created an unintentional trivialization, or at times magnification, of the development question that Africa faces. And this narrative has been accompanied by the Africa Rising narrative that we had in the 2000s. It has risen and is now ebbing. And when you look at the Africa narrative rising, it's similar to the Africa narrative of the 60s, when the cash crops were exported and Africa was rising and growing at a very rapid rate, that Singapore said it would like to look like Nigeria. So this narrative of Africa rising comes in 2000. And the question is, why is this narrative, what does it portend? One of the problems of being a statistician-general is I don't think Africa understands the magnitude of the problem. Yes, they know it's big, but they don't know how big it is. And once you don't have the notion of the magnitude of the problem you are tackling, then you know that you are in real trouble. There is weirdness of policy. The policy is not substantiated by facts, and those facts at times are very deficient in the African context because we don't run censuses, we don't have economic statistics that are offered. And these lead to deficiencies in policy setting. I'm not setting excuses for the big things that Africans actually do that are wrong politically, the African leadership in terms of corruption and so on. So I think in a speed date that I've made, I've tried to talk about the context within which the AI comes into Africa. One, it's a wounded continent. Two, it continues to be wounded by a multiplicity of things. Three, the AI is not the problem. The technology is not the problem. There are more systemic and fundamental problems that Africa faces that have to be dealt with. I'm not saying they must be dealt with first, but if they are not dealt with, AI and all these other things will exacerbate rather than resolve the issues that we are facing. Let me tell you about what it is. One of the things that China gets right and Africa gets wrong, one is there's something called International Comparisons Program that we as statisticians of the world, through that program we collate numbers about what each one of our countries, our citizens consume, in what quantities, at what price. And we convert those into purchasing power parities. On the basis of that, you can set your industrialization strategy. Sad enough, none of the African countries, including the one I come from where I headed the statistics office, has ever even looked in the direction of that data. Not even the ADB, not the ECA, not the AU, none of the countries have ever looked at that data, which is so rich, that talks about bread. If you look at that data, surprise, surprise, bread in Côte d'Ivoire, when you say, s'il vous plaît, the manger du pain, the price drops like that. When you come from Ghana, just crossing the road, and you say, may I have some bread, I eat bread, the price shoots through the roof. And that is not a factor of geography, a factor of environment, it is a factor of colonial history that determines what the price levels of grain of bread is. Yes, now we have 1,000 products on the list at the detailed level like bread across the continent, across the world. None of that data is used in African debates in the quest for industrialization. China took a different route. So is Europe. I thank you very much.
If you want to...
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rajeev Mantri. I'm an early stage venture capital investor from India. So speaking about the challenge of neo-colonialism, let me share India's experience, because India, obviously, as you all know, was ruled by colonial powers for over 200 years. India became independent in 1947. And we also had similar fears. We also had similar concerns about foreign companies coming in and about foreign governments influencing our economy and our society. So we remained closed for several decades. And because of these fears, we were inward looking. And the economic record tells us that because of this inward looking attitude, India missed out. We missed out on several technological waves. We missed out on the boat of economic progress and growth. And net, it was a losing proposition. So I do appreciate that given the difficult history, it is sort of hard to emerge from that. But I believe that countries should look ahead. At some point, you have to leave the past behind And the good news is that any government can set the terms on which it wants to engage with foreign corporations, with other foreign governments. So it's not a unsolvable problem. Several countries have done it, including India, which is doing it today, I believe. We are no longer a closed economy. We are open to new technology from other countries. If you look at our e-commerce sector, all the 3 companies today are 2 from America, 1 from China, and it's a fight between Walmart and Amazon and Alibaba in India. So who wins here? It's the Indian consumer that wins. And there is no reason to be fearful or have the belief that somehow Indians have lost because Indians don't own the e-commerce sector. So I would humbly advise that it's probably a better strategy to take a forward-looking view, try to heal the past, and stay open to new technology and know-how from outside on your own terms. And that obviously applies equally to the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is knocking at our door today.
Good evening. My name is Susan Bakesha. I come from Uganda. And I want to approach this from the perspective of promoting gender equality and women's rights. I come from a country which is largely agriculturally dependent, and women compose more than 70% of the laborers. And also, I want us to also know that, like most African countries, Uganda is largely patriarchal. So when you are thinking about artificial intelligence, we need to think about these aspects. Artificial intelligence would be very important because it's about promoting efficiency and help empowering women, in this case in agriculture, to be able to take their tasks and be able to save some time to do other tasks. So I also want to mention that given the patriarchal society, we need to be cognizant of the need to understand how we can use artificial intelligence to close the gender gap. For instance, if we brought about artificial intelligence maybe to meet the practical needs of the women, in the case of the redistributing gender roles in the home, for instance, if we had systems that can help women do their work in a most efficient way, this will be helpful in redistributing the gender roles within the household, and also to be able to enable women save time to participate in other productive roles. I also want to mention that artificial intelligence can help or support address issues of getting information and be able to analyze it in the most quickest time, to be able to allow or to be able to provide policymakers with actual quick information to be able to take decisions. But also, I also want to say that like countries like in Uganda, one of the main challenges we have now is high unemployment rates among the youth. So there's a fear that if we embrace artificial intelligence wholeheartedly, then it will be affecting job opportunities, Because where you have people employed, maybe 10 people, being replaced by a machine. That is one of the threats and the fear that people have, embracing artificial intelligence wholeheartedly, because now already we have high levels of unemployment. Now, if we embrace it wholeheartedly, what will happen to the people who get out of their jobs? It will be a threat to creating more a crisis where there's already a crisis about employment. I would also want to mention that we need also to think about who is driving the agenda, who is involved in designing these different products that are being pushed by artificial intelligence. So as people on the receiving end, which is the way it is designed, most likely if the people on the receiving end are not involved in the designing of these products, most likely they are likely to reproduce or even worsen the gaps that are existing within the society, particularly the gender gaps and also the differences between the rich and the poor. So as we think about artificial intelligence in Africa, and I'm talking about in my country and also in terms of the women, we have to think about how is data collected that leads to the design of these products that will be used in order to be able to inform the development process. Also, we also have to take note that in terms of science, in my country, very few women or young girls are in these fields because of the gender reasons, gender-related reasons. Most of the girls are discouraged from taking science-related subjects. Yet, this is an area where artificial intelligence needs a lot of contribution from the users to contribute. So in a situation where you find that very few women do science subjects, there's very few women engineers, very few women scientists, so it's unlikely for them to contribute to this process. So at the end of the day, they will be consuming a product where they haven't contributed to its design. So I think that what can be done is, before we take it on, we have also to consider that the end users also participate in the development of in the designing of these products. And also, we are also cognizant, we are also suspicious about the social relations that are disrupted by these systems. Currently, when you talk about mobile phones, like the impact of Facebook, I can talk about Facebook and Twitter in families, you find that the social relations, Africans relate a lot. They like to work in communities and as families. But with the advent of mobile phones, especially in the elite families, you find that everyone is doing their own work. Every work is done on the phone. Recently, I visited my sister. She has adolescent children, and they all have phones. But I was surprised that before the advent of the mobile phones, we would have supper together around the table. But this time, supper is ready, they send them text messages, okay, to come down for supper. Then afterwards, everyone picks their plate and goes to their room and eats from there. So there's a disruption about the African family and some values that we hold dear to our hearts. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Yao Zhang, founder and CEO of Roboterra, a company in robotics and education and AI education from California. But obviously, I look Chinese. I was born in China, and then I studied in the U.S. and then started this company, and then brought back the company and expand the business back to China. And then today we're working with more than 700 schools in more than 30 countries. So that's that's a quick background. But so we were given the task that this session has to be the most engaging one. So I'm going to do some work about it. I'm going to do some surveys actually first. So how many of you are parents? Raise your hand. Okay. Parents, question for you first, right? I just introduced my background. Basically, my company makes educational robots, right? Modules, hardware, modulars, and software that your kids can use to learn about programming, can learn to, like they used to play Legos before, or now they can play some new type of toys, but also learn. Who, of all the parents, right, who of you would think, no, thank you, Robotera, my kids don't need this at all? Okay, so okay. So all of you, you will get a discount code from me afterwards, okay? Look for me. Sorry. So for those who are not parents yet, how many of you are born after 1990? So the hardcore millennials. We have some. Yeah, we have some in the background. And the rest what? Are born after 2000? Very young? Any robots in the audience? No, not. Yes, there's one. So I want to mention, actually, it's really because of the too long flight. Otherwise, I would have brought one of the many robots of, any of my 9 years old to 18 years old students that they would make, right, after 10 or 20 hours of working on our technology and system, the robot that they would make. And then if I bring one of the robots here, with the internet here, actually anyone in the world, for example, your family, your children who couldn't travel with you to here today, or some of your colleagues, they don't want to take 3 flights and 24 hours, right, travel all the way here, although they really want it. But they can simply go to this Connected Robots website, right, either Robotera or letsrobot.tv, and then they can search for CyFy Africa. And then our, the last panel, graveyard panel, and then they can search for it, and then anyone from anywhere in the world, they can actually control that robot through this Wi-Fi, and then they can drive the robot.
Is this for the second question or for this question?
No, this is the intro of my opening statement.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a sales pitch. So this robot.
This was a sales pitch, not intended.
So basically, audience, from who couldn't be here, can actually drive the robots around. They can control the robot, attend the event as if they have a robotic avatar. So that is, after my first survey about your age, your background, that I want to share with you, technology-wise, we're already in an area that it's very ready that robots, actually, it's almost as simple as this one. It's literally, it's actually much simpler than a phone that you would have on a very, even simpler motor base that can be driven through a Wi-Fi network and then interact with people. So that's the first thing I want to make about, where we are in terms of today's automation and then sensors that's running around, which are the base, actually, to generate data, to be the base for AIs, artificial intelligence. And then, the reason I was asking in our audience, who are the ones, hardcore millennials, although we don't have that many, right? But because I actually prepared a question for them, but I want to ask a question to all of you in the audience. So, no matter of what age you are, and as someone born in China and then as a first generation immigrant went to the U.S. and working and living there, I wanted to ask this question that I asked myself before. So basically, when there are countries and then with a lot more talents, with a lot of great technology, how your country, so basically, how can you believe that you can as well when you don't have that technology? So if you want to leapfrog, when there's a new tech trend, what's the most important thing you should really focus on? That was what my training at Columbia in this economics education PhD program taught me about, and then what led me to start 2 companies, tech companies in software and also AI. And then this attitude is what I want to share, is the I can attitude. So I want to describe one sentence of being serving on, as a member on the Global Future Council of AI and Robotics Council. I saw with all the CEOs from big companies like IBM and then Infosys, I saw that no one knows how AI is going to change our world, but we do know that AI is not a US thing, not a China thing. It's something all humans should be worried about and be prepared about, because like the satellite that's reading all our mapping data, reading about the crops and then the harvest and everything. And then if AI develops so fast and out of control that there will be autonomous weapons, there will be drone that carries weapons and then knows all the data no matter what continent you are on, those AI, totally supercomputer controlled things will take something, harm us. So that's why it matters to everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Ineke. Let me give you a very short overview. I know, as I said, the graveyard shift and dinner is not a great combination. My name's Craig Wing. I'm a partner in a company called Future World. And even though my card says I'm a futurist, I can't tell you the future. So I apologize for anyone that's going to ask me questions around Bitcoin and the price. I can't tell you about that. There's definitely better experts in that. But before that, let me just come back to the question at hand. The question at hand was primarily, how does Africa in general deal with AI, roughly put, right?
Was actually, what is needed, what do we need to do so that the next wave of AI and ICT does not become another slaughtering of Africa, another wave of neocolonization and exploitation?
Spectacular.
Yeah,
And
but it is a positive question. It's about what can we do to prevent that?
100%. And on that, let me break it down very shortly and succinctly. The first thing I believe is the question of leadership, and it's a question of forward-thinking leadership at that. So if you look at it, Africa as a continent has the oldest average leaders, and yet it's the youngest continent. In some countries, the age gap's over 50 years. Now, with that brings the inability to not only think about new solutions, but the perception and rather the captivation of old solutions. Africa in general, across the continent, is still stuck in an agrarian age, never mind industrial age. Right? And because of that, doesn't allow us to leapfrog into this fourth industrial revolution. As eloquently put by some of my panel members before, the errors are compounded through unemployment and all the rest, and the challenges around how do we have leaders that can think about this and move this forward. The second thing is a question around regulation. How do you craft forward-thinking regulation? And this is no more evidence than in the US with Facebook at the recent Senate, where he was grilled by one of the senators, and they said to him very simply, how does Facebook make money? And so here's a paradoxical situation where we're caught in a continent where regulators want to make decisions but don't understand technology. So how do we keep up with that? We have to ensure the right people are part of the table, that are part of the conversations, who can help guide the regulation to enable the right moves around that. And the last point, very quickly, is a question of mindset. Right? It's a question of mindset saying, well, how do we shift very quickly away from saying that this is a continent that is a history of terrible things that is done to it through colonization, but also through itself. There's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of genocide, there's a lot of war and conflict between themselves. The question is, how do Africans as a whole, and when I say as a whole, I include myself, I'm South African, and so that's the elephant in the room. I am South African, by the way. That happens to look Chinese, that I am Chinese. But the truth of the matter is, how do us as Africans not fall into the trap of bringing up the same errors in the past by saying, how do we create solutions and move to a point of action, not a point of reaction? And more importantly, as opposed to stop fighting, and how do we find a path forward with progressive thinking and collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you. So now it's up to you, audience. as I said, let me repeat. You can ask, you can respond directly to the panel members, or you can, totally ignore what I said and make your own comment, answer your own question. What is needed for Africa? Yes, come up. What is needed for Africa not to, as Greg said, fall into the trap, not to engage this upcoming AI and ICT revolution as another wave of neocolonization and exploitation? Yes, Kis.
Okay, it's on now. Hi, my name is Kis Abraham. I come from Zambia. Speaking of elephants in the room, AI and this new revolution we're talking about, which is technology-driven, is not possible without capacitors and transistors and all those little elements that are required to power mobile phones and digital platforms. The source of those raw materials is coltan, which is actually a conflict mineral. Could the panel speak about how we can create a sustainable future with a conflict mineral and have this conversation grounded in this basic fact?
Good evening. My name is Salome Omamo. I'm from Kenya. I work a lot in the development field I've worked a lot in the development field for over the past 12 years. And in the development field, we work a lot with aid workers, and there's so many lessons that I've learned as someone who does a lot of research and monitor evaluation of projects. And so for me today, when I talk about AI, I know there's a lot that is going on in the African continent where the youth is being included in the area of innovation. But the question we need to ask ourselves is the understanding of aid and the agenda of aid in Africa, because I'll be positive about this and think that our youth will be inventors and will also contribute to the era of AI. But then at the same time, we recognize the fact that Africa is still lagging behind in so many areas, and we may still need aid, but we need to reevaluate aid and understand what aid is doing to Africa, because we've had programs in the past when ICT came first. We had computers being imported from the West by the development workers and being brought to countries that are to African countries. And these computers were second-hand computers. And they were brought to support education and other social work that was going on in Kenya and other African countries. But as I did my evaluation of these projects, these second-hand computers could be brought to the schools or to the community centers, and they would establish ICT centers and put these computers. And these computers, you could find that about 20 computers would be brought, and only 10 of them will be working. There were no technicians to repair the computers. There were no people to teach the children, especially in the educational sector, on how to use these computers. And so this really didn't help the African children. So it turned out that this technology that was brought in Africa was basically a dumping ground for the technology. So I'm pessimistic. I'm positive that as we get into the age of AI, we need to reevaluate aid and what aid is really coming to support Africa with, and understand what really aid is, and engage our government so that we do not, because I know in Kenya we are not allowed to, the government does not allow us to import second-hand computers, but I've worked in projects where second-hand computers are still brought into the classrooms, and I don't know how this penetrates. At the time I tried to talk about the fact that Kenya does not accept second-hand computers, but I was thrown out of the project before I know it. So I think before I knew it, I think it will take courage for us development workers to talk about aid, and if this aid is benefiting us or it's benefiting the people that are bringing the aid. So it needs a new opening of eyes. It needs courage. It needs for us to be not to see ourselves as the victims, but to speak about these issues to the government and to speak about them to the people that we are reaching to, so that they understand that these things are meant to help them, and they don't need to accept that things that are not benefiting them. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm that boogeyman that comes to spoil the party. In a way, some of our views are not very much welcomed in mainstream, or what I consider this space to be more mainstream. So my name is Madalitso Piri, and I wanted to comment on a few things that have been said on the panel. Firstly, how come the mic is playing games with me now? Okay.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, great. So this whole notion that, to my friends that are very pragmatic in approach to technology, to colonialist denialists, or the impact of it or lack thereof, I find it very interesting, matter of fact, you know.
Can I ask you to be very crisp and to the point? Because
it's very difficult because these conversations require dialogue. Yeah, they do. And this space is anti-democratic in a sense that it doesn't allow us to have those kind of difficult discussions. So I think we first need to democratize this space so that we talk about the difficult things. You know, if we have time, let's get into them. You know, I mean, we can all go home and walk away from here and say, oh, yeah, we attended a great conference.
That is why I suggested the structure.
Yeah.
You share your point. When there's time, you get a response, and then you can share with your neighbor. So there is time to discuss, but just be please crisp.
Okay. So what I want to, it's a warning that I want to say to my folk that are very pragmatic and denying some of the injustices and the historical injustices that have actually taken place on this continent, to say that, oh, just move on. One thing that I know about the Israeli community, Jewish community, the first Holocaust, or the second Holocaust of the 20th century, which was televised because the first one was not, which is a Herero genocide in Namibia, is that people continue to commemorate the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, every year, right? And Africans were just simply told, let's just move on. Colonialism didn't take place. State formation on the African continent is just something that we just came up as our own imagination, right? And yet we know that the barriers to entry or artificial intelligence itself can actually be used to the detriment of defining what humanity is, or what the African has actually deemed to be made to be, or the inhuman activities that can actually be done to the body of the African. Yeah, so that's just one thing. But I'm willing to relinquish my time and have a more robust, fruitful discussion. But I think let's stop being superficial and saying let's just be pragmatic. We need to ask the difficult questions.
Point taken. Thank you. Yes.
So I'm actually going to ask questions. So number one is, what does society look like in the future? I mean, are we going to live in a society that's like Black Mirror? So I just want some kind of indication from the panelists as to what will kind of be retained in the current context. I mean, our family is going to sit around a dinner around the table at dinner time, and you know what changes and what doesn't. And the second question is to Pali, and you know, in Africa we've got largely informal economies, and we don't have robust data around that. So how do we reconcile this tension between that and what we're seeing in terms of trends?
Yes. This is the last question for this round, yes?
Kamal Dahshan, Professor of Computer Science, Egypt. In fact, I have noticed that people talk about technology, about artificial intelligence, and some people don't know the difference between science and technology. Some people don't know what is artificial intelligence. So please, I ask the panelists to define these three terms, the difference between science, technology, and artificial intelligence. That's one thing. The other thing is, just to help the audience focus on what we are discussing. The other thing is, AI is just a tool. It can be used for a lot of things. What I expect from the panelists, please propose humanistic ideas for the benefit of Africa. You may talk about forests. You may talk about animals, saving animals, and maybe saving humans from some dangers, some epidemics, some so and so. Please, if I get something, it will be the future potential applications of artificial intelligence to serve Africans. Thank you.
Okay, panel members, you have, let's say, 7 minutes. So choose a question you want to respond to. And after the panel members have responded, I want you to turn to your neighbor and share what you want to share. The point that is most problematic to your heart, or the point that is most hopeful to your heart, in whatever way. But I want you to kind of use this opportunity to kind of share, even if it's only one thing that you really want to discuss in depth. You will get 5 minutes for that discussion. So over to you, panel members. I leave it up to you to choose any question you want to respond to. Okay, great.
So let me just answer a few very, very quick ones. The first question, gentlemen, you asked very, very rightly, the question around raw materials in Africa and how do we resolve some of those. The same question holds true around cobalt, I believe it is, in DRC. A lot of these challenges stem from, quite frankly, just a living wage. The fact of the matter is not unemployment, but a terrible rate that people can't afford to live, right? And so one of the abilities is to say, well, how do you ensure that a fair wage is given across the supply chain all the way from source to the end consumer, whether they're in the US, whether they're in Europe, etc. This, in as much as this isn't a session around blockchain, I believe that's potentially one of the solutions we can find. One, because it gives pure accountability and traceability, but also the hope is financial compensation is given fairly to all benefactors part of that chain. So I think that's the first one. The second one that I want to give to the gentleman, the very eloquent gentleman who asked about the future, the beauty of my job is that I don't think it's defined. There is no strict future. What does an African future look like? What does it look like for all of us? The answer is I can't give you that answer. But what I can say is the future is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. And it's the choices we make in forums like this where we decide what is the Africa that we want. Do we perpetuate the kind of Africa that we have that's symptomatic of corruption, of poor leadership, of reactive leadership? Or do we say, how do we move ahead like countries like Singapore or even Japan, who are decimated through different historical means, whether it's World War? How do we congruently together move forward? The final point I want to give is to the last gentleman, the professor, and thank you for bringing us back on point. I think it's absolutely key. How do we use AI? And I think this will lead into our last question, so I won't spend too much time on that. But for me, the question is, as you've correctly said, AI, robotics, all this kind of stuff is just a tool. The question is, how do we as human beings use this machinery, this technology, to become artists? That is the question. And for that, that'll lead up to the second part, is the question around usage of. And at the same time, usage of, as many commentators say, how do you use technology to make us superhuman? Superhuman, and again, it comes down to the question of choice. Do we want to be evil? Do we want to be good, as per, the Marvel story right now? But the question is fundamentally, technology is agnostic. It's not good or bad. It can be bad depending on the programming parameters, as Stephen Hawking says. The biggest existential threat to humanity isn't technology or computer, or isn't all robotics, it's capitalism. Thank you.
I also will just respond to several questions very quickly. First is to that lady who asked about the aid worker situation. I just want to mention one really wonderful case. It's a drone company at Stanford, and then their main application now is actually using drone to deliver blood products to help a lot of hospitals here in Africa, several countries. And then that's probably a well-known, because I saw people are nodding, that's a well-known case. That is entirely on IoT, Internet of Things and sensors, and then we can consider it basically AI, AI-empowered robots. So it's here already. And then the training, if we have medical workers and also, basic nurses trained to how to operate the drones, how to, even operate them with a phone together when they have certain medical data, then the services will be much better, even when roads are not built or even when hospitals here couldn't afford helicopters. So I view this as actually a great case of leapfrog of using better, more advanced technology for better development and aid cases than spending a lot on existing technology. So that's the first question. And then I want to respond to the question about, what is the future? How does the future look like? Instead of answering that, I want to ask questions again. iPhone, right? We all have mobile phones. 10 years only. Who could have envisioned how apps developed by all the more than 30 million engineers all over the world has been changing our lives? And among many of them are actually great apps developed by engineers in Africa and then for African users. So this is how I, especially as an entrepreneur, I view how technological innovations should happen. It's bottom up. Only when you really see the pain point, you can solve the problems, and then those are good products and those are good innovations. I think this should be encouraged. And then, so government simply couldn't plan this, but you can guide this. And then the most effective guidance for this is to prepare talents, indeed. So how the future will look like, I think the trend is there. Big data is the new crude oil, and AI is electricity. So no one is able to escape it. We're worried about when AI is becoming AGI, artificial general intelligence, that's going to threat humans. So the international world needs to work together to regulate the potential risks. But we know that's a trend. So that's my view about the future. And then, lastly, the professor reminded us the importance of what is even AI? I just want to provide a quick response on that. So AI is, at least from my view and also many of my engineers and product managers, AI is actually not one thing. It's tools. It's a bundle of tools. So it needs data. We need tools that generate data, like sensors, and then we need tools to storage data. Many new innovative companies in Silicon Valley are basically innovating on data storage and processing, and of course we need algorithms and then machine learning for machine learning, deep learning, modeling. So it's never one thing. It's a lot of tools. Actually, many teams are competing with each other. And yes, I'll stop here.
So I'll just respond to the person who was asking the question on colonial history and so on. So I was not suggesting that we should whitewash the past or kind of paper over it. But I was only suggesting that while it is important to acknowledge and sort of be aware of the past, you still have to look to the future. Because the past is past, none of us can change it. We've wrestled with this issue in India for many decades, where we were fearful of the foreigners, we were fearful of control by global corporations and so on. And like I said, it was a losing experience. It took us about 5 decades to emerge from that. And today you have Indian corporations which have done well in all the markets globally, including in the market of a former colonizer, the UK. So I think there's something to be said about taking a sort of forward-looking view. I believe that
Rajeev, if you're not adding to your first point, then just...
Sorry?
For the sake of time, if you're not adding
I'll
anything new
just
to your first opening statement.
So that was the first question that I wanted to address, where it's best to look ahead. And the second one on the future, I'll just say that on the what we will see in the future in technologies, I think what we're going to see, and one of my theses on this is that we will see trade in local services. So imagine a barber somewhere in India who gives haircuts to customers in the US or Europe or Africa. And you can ask, how will that happen? Well, it will be a combination of robotics, augmented reality, and high-speed 5G connectivity. So you'll basically be able to get haircuts and kind of even cosmetic treatments, things like that. Just as an example of what's possible. We already have very advanced robotics that are in surgery, for example, and there are doctors who are conducting surgeries. So why can't we have more basic consumer local services delivered through this medium?
Say something, or can you be very, very short?
Yes, there was a direct question around what's the basis for planning in Africa and how do we actually engage with the collation of evidence. I think it's in part, yes, there's scarcity of information for planning, but there's also scarcity of use of what is available. And I think the point I was making is there is something available, we are not using it. And artificial intelligence or technology is not going to help us use when we are not using anything that we have. And I think it's an important point that we have to deal with. The question around colonialism, certainly we shouldn't be apologists for colonial activity. In countries, there is also colonial debt, and countries are saying, pay back. And that's social justice. And I think with the world of the future, as it emerges, the issues of social justice are going to come up. Whether it's centuries or whatever, but they are bound to come up. Because those injustices, for as long as they don't get corrected, we will not find peace. Third one is on aid. One of the things that is happening in Africa, we know that 1.2 million people, the majority of them are not registered. There's no birth certificate, there's no civil registration. The discussions in Africa on this issue are not about the industrial impact of registration and transactions that will emerge out of that. And I think we are losing a major opportunity. And the discourse in policy, amongst policymakers and people who are handling tech are so narrow and short-term that they don't address the major revolution that can happen, including industrializing Africa better, if we take that subject to heart, because it will impact on banking, on physical products. Finally, the issue of artificial intelligence, in the main, if we have to think about it in stages, it probably has to be in a situation where we have less resources and skills. It may have to focus in staged ways in the movement of materials and products between people, because the whole thing of trade is exchange of goods and services. It has to do that while we mitigate the question of loss of jobs, because I think it's likely to lead to bleeding of jobs in an environment where people are not skilled. The question is, what is the moral issue around that? The future, we've got to think about ethics, and we've got to think about the future of work. And probably we may have to read the classics of Marx and Lenin and others around the distribution, not only the production and the holding of the means of production, but the distribution thereof. I think those classics are going to come back to us, and we have to discuss them and deal with them. Thanks.
Thank you. So now, audience, it's your chance to turn to your partner and share the one thing that you know that makes you think the most, the one thing that you know you learn, the one thing that you think, okay, if we want to make the best of the AI and ICT revolution hitting Africa, this is what I could do, or what we could do, or what needs to be done. So please turn to your partner and start sharing. The time for questions, next round. This is the time for sharing. Yes, please turn to your partner and start sharing. Discussion. Maybe this is the kind of discussion you want to continue over dinner? Yes? Hello? I really like the way you are talking. Okay. I really like the way you're talking. But can you stop it now, please? Hello, hello. Okay. Okay. I hope you continue this very important discussion over dinner. Now, we started late. We started 7 instead of 7:15, and we were given originally 1.5 hours and not an hour. So the structure of our session requires us to use, let's say, another 35 minutes. But I want to make sure whether Samir is kind of up to that, whether you are up to that, because the real meat of the session is, of course, the question of how do I want to be human in a time of AI and ICT. And then we can explore the more esoteric discussions of who am I? If I'm becoming a superhuman, as Greg says, what does it mean? Where's my locus of consciousness placed? In my head. So in other words, I can update my consciousness on a supercomputer, or is my consciousness also body-based, and I can imagine having a bionic body, but not a brain in a jar. In terms of interrelationships, do I want to engage with artificial intelligence like I want to engage with humans? Do I believe in the singularity? Those kind of issues we could discuss in this second round. So this is my sales pitch. I want to know whether you're up for it or whether you think it was fine, we have talked enough and we want to close it. Can I get a feel from the audience? You can be honest. Or have you just warmed up and you want to kind of explore a little bit more about this?
Who wants to explore more? I think even if there are, come on. Okay, then fine. Panel members, next round. Now it's the question, how do I want to be human in a time of artificial intelligence and information communication technology? And we are already, of course, there, but now we are thinking about where the Internet of Things is all pervasive, where we are really entering an age where we have to figure out who we are as human beings because artificial intelligence is becoming more and more human. Yeah.
Sure. So let me give a few thoughts on this as succinctly as possible. So how do we be human in this age of AI, machines, etc.? I think the answer lies in the question. It's to be human. What does that mean? I think, if you take a step back, artificial intelligence is exceptionally good at learning something very narrow and being able to apply that. Certainly, at least the concept of artificial narrow intelligence. Once you start getting into the fields of artificial general intelligence and super intelligence, then things change dramatically. But certainly for the short term, the question of how do you be human, it's to be human. And what does that mean? Well, it's the values that we espouse as human beings. It's things like creativity, ingenuity. It's things like saying, how do you show compassion? How do you show emotion and be okay to show emotion? Looking into the future, some of the challenges are going to be saying, well, how are we able to change the cost structure and the payment structure to value the things that currently, in today's world, we don't? And those are things like human relationships, things like caregivers, things that you can't necessarily replace. There's science and there's studies that have been done where they say, doctors can possibly do the work of machines, but it's the bedside manner that people want. And it's within that narrative, without going too deep and into some of the philosophical questions, to be human is exactly that. It's to be human, to play to the strengths, which is about, as I say in my country, about Ubuntu. I am because you are. And how do we create more of that? By saying, well, we are human and so are you, and I recognize it in you.
Yes?
I'll just build my statement actually upon some questions last round our audience asked already. So now we've known AI is a bundle of different technologies, and data is so important. And AI is developing so fast at a speed that I want to shout out loud that we just can't, no one just is able to afford not to be prepared for it. Why? Because let me give you two examples here. One is, for example, in the United States, right? A lot of the AI products, for example, telling about your health conditions from just a mobile phone. There are lots of AI technology bias issues being discussed in the AI tech community, right? Why? Because a lot of the products are developed by white male programmers. So that's why, for example, real issues that women suffer or real issues that minorities or colored people like me suffer that would not be considered. That's why those products are biased in its own design. So for tech community, for discussions of tech communities there, when we're talking about AI as a technology, its inclusivity issues, and then some of the immediate action plans are we should include more women and more people with different background becoming product managers, understanding all our users so that the products can be better. So that was more of the situations there. But think about globally, right? If AI features, imagine, let's go back again, AI application for medical applications, right? AI that's reading, let's say, X-rays that can tell lung, abnormally immediately, right? Imagine there's some large ophthalmology, going on worldwide, and then if we want to really help people on this continent, then we simply need data. Without data, the model will not work for you, right? The model will not have predictability for you to help you. So that's why no one can afford not to participate in it. But how to participate in it is the question policymakers like all of us in this audience should consider. There are, so basically, if there are other companies or other research institutions developed AI algorithms, like the ones reading X-rays, on medical, for medical purposes, how you want your national health data to, become part of that database and participate in that, so that you can start to train some of the AI models that actually benefits your citizens. So, and what you have to do to avoid potential, privacy issues and then risks there. So the reminders I want to have, really just for all of us is that you can't afford not to prepare for it. So be part of the international regulatory bodies, and then those are reminders. So upon the reminders, to answer the question, what makes human human, right? If AI is going to be so powerful, and then we just don't know when AI is becoming AGI, at least I have conservative point of view, but we know it's so powerful because it's essentially a more, stronger computer, processing data and then giving us, a lot of good insights from the data. Then what makes human will be what humans can do but computers not. It's actually our ability to work under constraints, right? Coming up with creative solutions. So I so agree with my fellow panelists that it's a human creativity, and then we can have different ways to define it, but I leave it there. Thanks.
Well, I would like to remain human, and the age of AI. First of all, I would like to take AI as a tool that I can use to improve myself as a person, and also to be more efficient in what I'm doing, but also have control over how I think. I wouldn't like AI to dominate my thinking and the way I relate with others. So as I embrace AI, I would like to be part also of the process of the designs, the products that I'm about to use, but also to be able to be in charge of the information that I give out, to also be rest assured that the information I give about myself when I'm applying for a product of AI, such that my privacy is protected. And also, I would like also to continue to relate face-to-face with my fellow human beings, and not to be overtaken by the mechanical relationships that are created by most of the AI products. Thank you.
So, well, if we have to talk about being human in the age of AI, I think first we have to agree on what it means to be human, and second on what AI is. So I think basically it becomes an argument about semantics, and I would argue that there are many humans who are already like robots in some ways. So let's talk about what doesn't change. So humans for centuries, for millennia, have been motivated by greed and fear. Humans are driven by sleep, hunger, love. These things don't change. So the rest of the world and the technical tools available to humans will change, but essentially the very primal driving emotions and motivations that humans have, if they change very, very slowly. In fact, that is what our problem is today. That we are still, the tribalism that is there in human communities, it's a vestige of the past, but it may be less valid in today's world. But we still hold on to it. So in that sense, I would say we will continue doing things that we do today. There will be some challenges on what my identity is, or what my job would be in a different technological context, and that's why skilling matters a lot, reskilling matters a lot, continuous learning matters a lot. So this notion that we go to school for 10, 12 years and then we go to a college for 3 or 4 years, and that's the end of learning. It's going to be very different from that. Where, I think people will keep going back to school and learning new things throughout their life. So in sum, I will say that it's going to be a different future, but there will be so many productivity enhancements that I think all of us will be better off.
It looks quite possible that the world of AI is a world of abundance. Of course, each period in life has always been a period of some levels of abundance. Wealth productivity has increased significantly, yet we witness a lot of poverty. So without addressing systemic impediments, particularly given that we talked about the conditions in Africa, with or without AI, it will be a life very difficult to live, and it can't be human if we don't resolve those impediments. So the first thing is our social relations, and that's why I said we really need to go back to the classics of Marx, of things like surplus value, because now the machines will be doing all this. And in fact, when you read the classics of Engels and Marx, they perceive of a world that technology will solve all these things, and people can do other things that are more beneficial rather than mundane things that technology can do. Now, AI is certainly anti-capitalism. It's anti-accumulation. So in the main, the contradictions of capitalism will be at their greatest. And if we don't anticipate and deal with those, then the world will be doomed, because the modes of production will be so easy and simple that there's no need for accumulation and crass materialism that we have. So it looks like in a period of AI, which I wish I would live in, of abundance, I would increasingly look at not only the social relations of production, but the social relations of internationalism, solidarity, art, travel, humanity, and probably dealing with the challenge of the virtual me, because that virtual self is going to be a problem to deal with. But we will have to deal with that so that our center of thinking remains as the center. So I wish the AI period, and I think we have to deal with rights-based culture. What are the human rights? What are those rights? We've got to engage those very, very deeply. Thanks.
Thank you. I get a note here about the interpreters. Must I thank them, or have they left?
Okay, we should thank them.
Oh, okay. Well, from all of us, and I can speak, and I know I can speak for everybody, not only my panel members, but everybody. Thank you, interpreters. You were stellar. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now we have limited time for a couple of comments from the audience. So you can reply to what one of the panel members said. You can also come up with your own comment, answering the question, how do I want to be human in a time of AI and ICT? So try to get to the mics fast, because only the first ones can be accommodated. Yes.
Okay, so I want to play not a devil's advocate, because I don't like the term, but an angel's advocate, right? So I have a comment, really, on intervention. I think here in Africa, given the tonality I've been hearing with how we have been responding to the AI conversation throughout the day, I think even if I link it to the conversation about entertainment and how Hollywood has successfully brainwashed the way we look at ourselves, and Hollywood is to blame for everything. I think Hollywood has very successfully instilled fear in many African nations with regard to AI. Who remembers that Will Smith film? Is it iRobot? I was in conversations about AI in my country with a few officials, and they referred to this movie in a conversation about why we should not engage. And my thinking was, okay, so you're trying to tell me that a movie that has been created in a nation that is itself spearheading this revolution is actually freaking you out from engaging with it. And I think African nations, the current generation, and us as youth ourselves, are so grappled with the fear of this new innovation that we cannot ourselves be innovative and see opportunities. I am sick and tired of going to places and hearing people complaining about colonialism. Honestly, it happened, it passed, let's move on. I do not think we can engage and literally move forward if we are constantly it's great to look back. Yes, it happened. Yes, our people are colonized. Yes, neocolonialism is happening. But what are we doing about it to progressively move as leaders in this new revolution? We must take our futures in our hands and say, yes, it happened, but we must set the rules and set our agenda rather than always looking back and complaining about what these people have done. Because the thing is, with that realization, with that tonality, that means we are agreeing and we are in full agreement with the fact that they succeeded, that even though we're independent, we are still colonized here. So I think we need to defeat the colonial mindset and embrace the possibilities that we can be leaders in our own industry. That we need to have the tonality of leadership. We need to be in a conference like this and say, yes, this happened, but how can I learn to move forward? How can I grapple with the new realities and say, okay, how am I going to take this reality that is AI back home and tell the youth back home and tell the government that we need to embrace it, and instead of being consumers, we must be the innovators. How do we create the agenda of the future? Why do we have to take from them for America? I'm tired and sick and tired of saying, oh, we are only consumers, and oh, we should also do. I'm like, oh my gosh, no. We are the nation of, and I will refer to the pyramids. We are that nation. We are the nation of the Shaka Zulus. We are the nation of, what's her name? The Queen of Sheba. We are the nation of the Nile. We are the nation of, oh my gosh. What I'm trying to say is we need to pick up our tools, embrace the position that we have now. Yes, look into the future and learn from what happened, but not move forward with it. Because that concept, if you keep looking at the rearview mirror, we cannot move forward. So the message and the tonality that we have from here, that we take back home, we need to remember that this is the message that we're also instilling in our kids and in our youths. And the moment that we keep doing that, then this defeatist mindset will not end in this continent. So let's be leaders and let's change our continent the way we know we can. Let's not stop complaining about what colonialism did to us. And let's talk about what we can do for our continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Giselle?
Yes. Just a small comment about having used artificial intelligence devices like Hey Google, which are quite interesting. I found that coming from an African background, we do not have Africans who are content developers in this particular industry. For example, if I was speaking to the Hey Google device, it's very likely it wouldn't understand my English, my intonation. And what's funny is that Africa has all these various ranges of English versions. We have one from Nigeria, we have one from, just still within Nigeria, there are like 10 different versions. There is one for Uganda, there is one for Kenya. So I'm calling on Africans to become content developers. Our roads are not named. We usually refer to places based on how far it is from the mango tree. So if we could incorporate all this into our artificial intelligence device, we don't have to wait for the Americans to do that. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Giselle?
Yes, first of all, I would like to see, to know where the policy is being discussed. We have to be part of the discussion. We have to be there too. And secondly, I'm seeing how we end up all the slavery. People working in the mining and so on and so forth. I think it's time to end those kind of jobs and see how we share the revenues. I think everybody is afraid because if this kind of job is ended, what are people going to do? So it's time to change the mindset and see that it's only we can live in a different way. That is not only pursuing the profit, is pursuing the well-being of all the humanity, all people in the in humanity. Because all what has been discovered, even what was discovered in the previous revolution, could have brought us in at a very human level. But this was withheld. When I think of tractors were there, but women were continuing hoeing the soil. So what was the mindset to avoid people, to avoid the women using these tractors and being free? So it's about changing the mindset. It's about starting to tell the kind of story we want to see, you know. How can we be human? It's starting to discuss and visualize the kind of human being we want to be. I'm seeing myself like somebody who have left all these kind of jobs to, you know, to the robots and start, you know, learning music, philosophy, metaphysics. That's how I'm seeing myself being more human.
Salam alaikum. Tout d'abord, il faut savoir que nous sommes tous les habitants.
1 second.
Okay.
I have to check whether there's still a translator for you. I do know you speak English.
Yeah, there is. Go ahead.
Oh, there is. You may continue.
Nous sommes les habitants de la même planète, la Terre. Donc, les frontières ont été créées pour diviser les populations du monde, ça c'est clair. Et sur notre planète Terre, nous sommes tous en danger. Il y a le problème de la poussée démographique incroyable, les pollutions de la mer, de l'air, les richesses commencent à disparaître rapidement. Donc il y a le problème de la qualité de la vie. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'on doit faire tous les êtres humains, sans distinction de race ni de religion, parce que le seul problème que nous avons, c'est la lutte contre la pauvreté, contre la désertification, contre la pollution, contre l'ignorance et contre l'intolérance. Donc, nous devons tous penser à l'avenir. Et pour voir notre avenir ou notre futur, il va falloir qu'on travaille toutes les intelligences du monde, et que tous ensemble, nous réfléchissons pour sauver ce bateau qui est en train de couler doucement et que beaucoup ne se rendent pas compte. Alors, nous avons le même destin, et notre destin est entre nos mains. C'est-à-dire, il va falloir penser et faire travailler la matière grise qui est chez l'homme. Et l'homme, c'est lui qui a inventé la technologie, ce n'est pas le contraire. Donc seulement, il va falloir savoir l'utiliser pour le bien-être de l'humanité entière. Ainsi, nous aurons contribué à un futur propre, un futur de tolérance, un futur de justice socio-économique, et ainsi l'humanité peut-être vivra mieux. Sinon, si on continuait dans chacun raconte ce qu'il raconte et chacun, quand il parle, il s'en va, le moment est sérieux et décisif pour tous ensemble, ceux qui ont la connaissance doivent l'apporter à ceux qui ne connaissent pas et s'entraider tous ensemble pour le bien de toute l'humanité. Et c'est la seule voie qui nous reste, mes chers amis.
Sally will be the last one because I have the feeling that you're going to repeat what you said before.
No, mine will be short.
Are you sure about that?
I'm very sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take the risk, but after
Thank
Sally.
you. Thank you.
Okay. Again, my name is Salome Omamo. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. In addressing the fear of the unknown, especially when it comes to social relationships, I think there's so much money that has been put into research and development issues, and there have been very many lessons that have been learned that we are ignoring, because we have had several publications and policy discussions, especially when there came the uptake of ICTs. So my question is, how are we going to use these lessons that have been learned in projection of how AI is going to influence our social lives, especially gender and education and all the other social issues that we will be discussing. So the relationship between AI, the social sector, and the publications that we've had, and how we are going to use those lessons learned and publications to to impact on the fears that we have over AI and the relations. Yeah.
Sorry, so mine is just to respond to the human question. At the end of the 19th century, there were two revolutions that took place. One in America and one in France. The American Revolution gave us birth to a very faulty conceptualization of humanity based on the pursuit of liberty, happiness, and whatever is embedded there. The French gave us the birth of égalité, fraternity, and equality. Right? And these were principles that were meant to guide the rest of the world. What we tend to forget is that there was one revolution at the beginning of the 19th century, in 1804, that was conceptualizing humanity from below. And that was the Haitian Revolution. It's not acknowledged. Matter of fact, oftentimes it's actually seen as a rebellion, not as a conceptualization of new humanity. So until our discussions incorporate what it means to find a new humanity and link it to technology, we'll continue to move around the same circles. And why I say this is because Africans, for a very long time, historically, as much as we would want to dismiss the importance of looking at history, have been used as guinea pigs in experiments, in the development of drugs, in the conceptualization of a faulty humanity, where the African continent or peoples of the African continent were deemed not to be human enough, therefore pain could be inflicted on them on so many levels, right? So I think we in our conceptualization of AI, we also need to link these two conceptualizations and then ask ourselves, what is the revolutionary approach to a new humanity that brings about the interface of technological changes that we're witnessing now, so that people of the South can actually be included in the global canon of being human again.
Thank you. That was actually very beautiful. Thank you.
Final words from you, Ineke, because now we have to close the room. So I'll have to step in. We have 95 minutes now. You have the final 3 minutes to conclude. That's being human.
So I would like to invite you to share with your partner during dinner. Otherwise, Samir will kill me. The only thing I want to say as closure is thank you very much. I had a feeling like I was in a meeting with a lot of co-researchers, and we were all exploring our own lives, becoming our own scientists. and I love the experience. So I hope we have more of these conversations in the future, because I think this is how we not only will alleviate anxiety in Africa and in ourselves, but how we can transform those anxieties in excitements and in creative innovation. So thank you very much. And I want to conclude by thanking Observer Research Foundation and the Moroccan government for not only organizing this conference, but letting us do our panel the way we wanted to do it.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
No, I think we should all applaud Ineke for getting this conversation going. I think it was beautiful. I think this was a good finale to 1.5 or 2 days of intense conversations. She provoked many feelings within many of us. She provoked an actress I have spotted who's going to be in Bollywood very soon. The passion and emotions were tremendous. Well done, Khalila. You sing well as well, so you're ripe for Bollywood. She sings beautifully. You must watch her sing tonight. New York, that's the song she sings. But please join me in applauding the panelists for their wonderful contribution and for provoking this marvelous discussion. Remain seated. We don't have time for changeovers. Ineke has stolen all of it. Finally, as the chair, let me make a few thank yous. I think they are in order. I don't want to try and conclude this great conference by any thoughts or takeaways. Clearly we have seen over the last few days that culture, language, geographies are not barriers, and this conference in a sense represents the power of difference that can create this conducive ecosystem of conversation, and that's something that was on display even in this final panel. I think Ineke and the panel also raised an important point. In fact, the last 2 or 3 panels touched on something which was quite, for me, educative, that while we are obsessed with science, technology, maths, and STEM, and women being in STEM, I think equal emphasis has to be on social sciences, philosophy, sociology, and that is what being human also means. That how, the greatest advancements of science in the last 1,000 years had great advancements in social thinking. And I think as long as we can keep this thinking going, we will be human. And I think social thinking is being human in many ways. And I think that's the second takeaway that I get from this conference. And the third, of course, is that it's impossible to regulate technologies with governments and structures of the 20th century. Regulation needs a redesign. Regulation has to be by design within devices. It has to be engineered ethics. It has to be community-led. It has to be dispersed. It has to be multiple in terms of its ownership. And I think that multiplicity of ownerships is the third theme that I learned from this conference over the last few days. A human-first approach led by women will be different. And I think that's going to be being human in the 21st century. In fact, let's reframe the debate of this panel. Let's reframe the title of this panel. Can we be human without AI? I think that's the question to ask. That if we don't embrace technology, if we don't use the benefits of technology, can we remove poverty? Can we remove despair? Can we remove some of the key challenges? So being human with and without technology is both going to be a challenge. And I think that's the question that came out quite clearly over the last 2 days. And finally, I think one of my co-panelists said it in the green room that in fact, there he is. The gentleman is right here. I think what came out quite clearly was that we need to celebrate ourselves. We need to celebrate our identities. We need to celebrate our diversity, be proud of ourselves, forget the past, look at the future, be the internet, be a melting pot of multiplicity of views, of ideas, of identities, of ideologies. Change your mind, fail. Being human is failing. Being human is failing again and again. And I think that's again something that came out quite clearly. Keep trying, keep changing, keep moving, and that's being human. Let me thank the translators, El Mustafa, El Haddad, Amin, Aziz, Bashir, Pear, Emma, thank you very much. You were superhumans. You were not only humans, but you were superhumans. And of course, let me thank the wonderful AI team that I led, Sonali, Beda, Madhulika, Akhil, Terry, Tanir, Vijay, Bushra's team, Manar's team, and they are clearly, they are autonomous systems, the way they worked, the way they delivered, the way they produced, they were more than human. But the final word, therefore, must go to Beda and Sonali. Please come, take the mic, say goodbye, say thank yous.
It was fantastic having all of you here. All of us learned a lot. We hope that you learned a lot as well. Well, we're here with the final housekeeping announcements as usual. The Moroccans are changing up their time zone, so all of us, in fact, will need to go coordinate with the reception desk after dinner. This needs to be done unless you want to be human in Morocco and give up your citizenship. Yeah. Well, some of these conversations have been absolutely fascinating. I've been doing CyFy for 3 years now, but the conversations that we've had here, the demographic that we engaged with here, we haven't encountered before. And the ideas, the freshness of the ideas, the back to basics approach that we have taken here has really grounded us, has really given us a concrete vision forward. And yeah, that's about it. Sonali?
You have pretty much covered everything. I literally have nothing to say, but a big, big thank you. I know many of you have put in a lot of effort in trying to get here. We deeply appreciate all those efforts. Beda has already said the housekeeping announcements. I would like to say a big thank you to all of you for making this conference a big, big success. A big round of applause to all of you.